Like how many of us are doing something because we're living in a false narrative? Are you doing this to perform? Are you doing this to make up for something that took place, way back when? Is it possible that we're doing things, even healthy things, but we're doing it for the wrong reasons?
Yeah.
Are we doing it to fulfill a narrative that took place basically back in our childhood? I just want to ask the question, are you good?
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, something that I know I want to talk about with you as well as just our audience, you, the viewers and listeners. I really just want to be a little vulnerable for a little bit. And a couple weeks ago, I just noticed I woke up on a Monday morning and just felt very off. To take words from good old Miss Melba, I felt out of sorts, and I could not pinpoint what it was. I felt like I dropped a lot of balls just on the work side of things, just things that I normally pay attention to. I just missed, and so I found myself beating myself up on that area, and then I found myself even kind of stuck when it came to my personal time with the Lord. Usually I know exactly what to read. I have, my routine and my rhythms and everything like that. And I just felt very stagnant. And then I also noticed just I pride myself in growing and learning and developing. I love, if I'm not reading something, I'm listening to something. If I'm not listening to something, I'm reading something, whether it's a podcast or an audiobook. Even I found myself, doing that even just through, YouTube or whatever. But that's something I've really developed in the past 10 years. And I actually find joy in that.
Yeah.
I don't look at it as, okay, let me go, But this time I did. I found myself just really tired from I don't want to learn anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to grow. I don't want to develop. I don't want to do really anything.
Yeah.
And so it just all that was kind of messing with me. From a professional side, I just kind of felt low. From a spiritual side, I felt low. And from a personal side, I just felt, off. And I finally got to catch up with a mentor of mine. And I honestly wasn't going to bring it up because it felt just so stupid.
Right.
It felt very dumb. And I'm like, man, this isn't even worth talking about.
Yeah.
And so needless to say, I brought it up with him. And the first question he asked me, which I appreciate, he goes, have you ever dealt with burnout before? And I thought about it and I said, yes, but I didn't know until I left the season. And he goes, okay.
The B word.
Right. I mean, another way to ask it is, have you ever felt so exhausted and depleted you feel like you couldn't go any further?
Yeah.
And so I answered that question. And after I did, his second question, his follow-up question was, okay, are you currently experiencing something now that you've experienced previous then in that same time frame, And I had to really think about it.
Yeah.
And it took me a good 10 or 15 seconds to answer. And I said, yes. Like what I'm feeling right now, I'm noticing it in that same time.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially he basically just kind of helps me start processing it and was able to help me identify. So is it possible then the thing that you're feeling now is actually something you have felt before, but the difference is you're catching it small. Instead of it waiting until you exhaust yourself.
Yeah. Till you're running on fumes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was, we're 10, 15 minutes in the conversation. That was a revolutionary moment for me.
Yeah.
And so we processed this together and ended up being about a 2-hour conversation, but something I learned in the process, just as we were talking through it, as much as I love developing and learning and growing, something I realized is it really stemmed back to my childhood. And what I mean by that is growing up, I struggled with reading comprehension, which I did. And so there were times where I had to...
What does that mean? When you say, you read something and you just didn't understand it?
Correct. Or I would misinterpret it. And
Interesting.
So things I had to do often, and it actually still happens to this day. So It's not that it's completely, gone. So, something mom and dad are really good at is, say, hey, read 2 or 3 times the same thing.
Yeah.
Other people can read it one time, they got it. That was not me as a kid. I had to read something 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times to really process the information. So there was that. That was a contributing factor.
Which to me, by the way, 2024, amazing, because you outread me on any given day. My goal, this has been my goal now for quite some time, I'm like, I'll just read 12 books a year.
Yeah.
Like if I can get to 12 books again, but it also goes for me, not enjoying reading anymore does go back to the burnout factor. An influencer I follow on social media. We were kind of talking about it a little bit. Like, 'cause she went to law school and she's like, I used to love reading, She's like, as a kid, like I loved reading. And then once I got through like law school, I hated it. Like it burned me out. Like I do not want to pick up another book. And I feel like that was the same for me, like I loved reading. And then there's the season of you read to almost perform, and just to kind of keep up. And then also like reading aviation one-on-one books is also not the greatest,
Even though we were aviation majors, because we were genuinely interested at the time in aviation.
Right. And even it's like, all right, that's great. Like, how is this practical? How is this helpful? So I find that, I say all of that to say, I find that very amazing because like you do outread me any given year. Like even if, like I know you've been trying to finish one of the books.
2.
However, think of everything else you've read.
Yeah.
So I may have finished that one book, but you have read so much more. And for me, like I'm just going to read the books of the Bible and be like, yeah, I read a whole book.
Well,
Jude, done.
So I love that you use the example of 12 books, a year.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put a pin in that because I'm actually going to connect it back to that.
Okay.
I think this is a great actually example. So something I learned about, myself in my childhood, going back to, reading comprehension, right? So mom and dad are good at reminding me and going, hey, you have to read sometimes 3 or 4 times, same thing, and that's okay. And so they helped me to normalize that.
Right.
Right. The additional thing was one of my kindergarten and preschool teachers, around that time, maybe in first grade, they went up to my parents and said, hey, let him choose what he wants to read. So this is actually where I got into Goosebumps,
Never read it.
Yeah. It's, man, as a kid, I love, which is funny because I don't like scary stuff.
Well, I hated the cover, so I'm just I'm not checking this out.
But for some reason, the cover is like what is that? So I read Goosebumps
so
a lot.
I read Sweet Valley High and Babysitter's Club instead.
I think my sister read Babysitter's Club.
Oh my gosh, loved Babysitter's Club.
So they let me do that. That's what also got me into comic books.
Okay.
So I would read comic books. And then, I know this is crazy, I started reading Edgar Allan Poe. Way above vocabulary wise and all that stuff, but that's how I got to Telltale Heart.
I was gonna say he's a very dark writer.
He is very much so, but for some reason
this does not match up.
But here's the connecting factor though. So when summers came, mom and dad just gave me permission to read anything I wanted. Right, I did well in high school. I graduated 3.6, graduated 3.2 in college. I'm not saying that like to go, oh, look at me. No, it was, I only graduated with that high of a GPA because mom and dad had to stay on me. Okay. So to use my dad's language, they were helicopter parents, which they had to be, like, appropriately. Kayla, on the other hand, even yourself, which is something I always envied, y'all were just initiators, man. Y'all just took initiative and just did it, so someone didn't have to come along and tell you. You guys were great even at that age of what Mel Robbins would call parenting yourself, meaning you did not require or need someone to hover over. You just did it. And that was something I envied, but it wasn't until I went back to grad school and recognized that it's not that I don't like learning and growing or developing. It has to matter to me.
Right.
And so throughout high school and college, I struggled to comprehend certain things because I just didn't care. And actually, you're a huge part of the story of helping me identify a healthier version of myself. Yes, shout out to my wife. You can feel yourself. This is because seriously, you're instrumental of this. In our first year of marriage, when it was my birthday, you got me a leadership book, and amongst other things. Right. But I remember that was the first gift that I opened up. I'm like, why are you giving me a book? Like, this is, of course, I'm not going to say it out loud. It's like, that is a little lame. I never said it out loud. But then I actually started reading the book. It was a book on leadership. And I found myself just excited in a way I've never been excited before. And to your credit, you picked it up, seeing something in me that maybe I was doing that I didn't recognize I was doing. And that actually opens up my world to start reading again, to start doing audiobooks again. The funny thing is, it was 2015 at this point. I was already listening to podcasts at this point because I did all the time in Afghanistan. Right. So what I didn't recognize about myself is I was learning and growing, but from an audio perspective. But you were the first person to get me back reading a book again. And you helped me break a false narrative for years that I thought I struggled with reading comprehension. I thought I did not like learning and growing and developing. The truth is, I actually do comprehend very well. It just has to tie back to a subject and where I care.
Yeah.
And so the gap I was feeling regarding just feeling off of this narrative of, man, I don't feel like learning, growing, or developing, my mentor was like, okay, so why can't you just stop? And I remember just going, what do you mean, why can't, I'm not going to stop growing and developing. And he said in a way, like, you don't have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
All that being said, I know it sounds like I'm rambling. I promise there's a point, and here's really what it is. I recognize, as much as I love growing and developing, within the past decade, what's happened is I've swung over to the opposite side, mm-hmm. and I've to the point where I've kind of found my identity in it. And I found my identity in it because I did not want to go back to the unhealthy side of me where I felt lazy. And so the thing that I've been trying to fulfill, a little bit, not completely, but what I've been fulfilling is I don't want to go back to that side of me. I don't want to go back to that lazy version of me. Yeah. I don't want to go back to that 5-7-year-old boy where I didn't think I could comprehend something, where yes, I graduated quote unquote with a decent GPA, but that's why grad school was such a huge accomplishment for me, because no one told me to do it. Yeah. It was the Lord told me to do it.
Except the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. It was the Lord that told,
and your wife begrudgingly. It's like, yeah, sure, go back to grad school.
But it was a reminder of like how many of us are doing something because we're living in a false narrative. And so that week became a moment. So now I'm still listening to a couple things here and there, but now I'm doing it because I want. So now the gut check I'm asking myself is, hang on, Mark, are you doing this to perform? Are you doing this to make up for something that took place, way back when? Or are you doing this because you genuinely want to? And at the beginning, that's what it was. Yeah. At the beginning of it was, I was reading and listening to everything because there was just an excitement. And somewhere over time, over the past, I don't know, maybe year, but it became more evident the past 2 weeks, it swapped to the other side. Yeah. And so I said that to say, and this is kind of where I want to spend this time together, is it possible that we're doing things, even healthy things, but we're doing it for the wrong reasons? Yeah. Are we doing it to fulfill a narrative that took place basically back in our childhood? I just want to ask the question, are you good? Yeah. Because I wasn't, and the beauty was that my mentor said at the end of it, he said, Mark, one of my favorite statements, Kirk Rochelle says, every big problem was once upon a time a small problem that was never addressed. And he went, Mark, the fact that you're addressing it now, you're addressing it when it's small, instead of waiting for it to go big. And he said, that's actually a win. And you're attacking it with curiosity. And so I just want to pause and just have our viewers and listeners ask themselves, are you attacking those small moments that's going on the inside of you with curiosity? Or are you just going, no, never mind? And every time you do that, your emotions are kicking in trying to talk. But the logical side goes, you're good. So the emotion goes, okay. And it just retreats. And so I just wonder, are you doing that right now?
And oftentimes we always want to pretend like we're not affected by certain things, because you're like, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm not affected by that. Like, none of those choices, affect me. And as you were speaking, there is something very specific you said, and I not only want to challenge you, but also to those who are listening to us. You said, I didn't want to go back to being that 5-7-year-old boy. And I literally just had a quick picture of little Mark. And once you've asked yourself, are you good? You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your younger version to release them. Like, that 5 to 7-year-old did the best he could with what he knew and what he had. And he grew up into an amazing young man, who, like, again, there is so much I could say about you. So I would even challenge you and anyone who's listening, if you're holding your former self hostage, you have to release them as well. Wow. You just have to, because they truly did what they could. And yes, you may have needed like a helicopter parent, but you still made it. You may have had to make some choices that you're not proud of now as an adult, but you made it. And having it hang over your head for the rest of your life is not going to help you move forward. You know, Pastor Robert, he's currently going through the whole grace thing. You know, and so I was like, to go grace period, you know, like
which is what he's calling it.
Yeah, like
grace period.
Yeah, like that's the name of his book. So I'm always like period,
Right.
you know, and so I do think it goes back to that.
You're right.
You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
So even for you, you need to release 5-7-year-old Mark and know that he truly did the best he could with what he had. And made the best of the situation and grew up into a fine young man.
Yeah.
You know?
I appreciate that, sweetheart.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I received that. And y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to see more clips, check out over here. Want to see full whole episodes, check out over here. Otherwise, we will catch you guys on the next one. Have a great day.